Good morning. I hope everyone is doing great. Snowy Washington, yes. We had a dusting here in Northern California. We're low enough that we didn't get all of that, but anyway, that was good. We're not huge snow people, so it's just nice and rainy here. We've had some rain for a while now. A lot of it. We have a little pond in our backyard. All right. Good morning. Good morning, Kyla. Pop in and say hello. Let's see how many of you are doing your hexagons. If this is something that you have enjoyed learning about, even though we've only had one class so far, but we've got several other things. Hello, Karen. Oh, from Austria. So it's evening there. All right. So today we're going to continue with our hexagon lesson. And I, have looked at a lot of different things, and I've made hexagons in a lot of different ways for different projects, and I've made a couple of quilts that work with putting hexagons together, that partial seam, Y seams, all of that. And we're going to get to some of that, but there's some easy, fun ways to make this quilt go quickly and easily. And today I want to look at and work with you to put together a bordered hexagon. It's not hard. It's quite simple. But unless you kind of think through it or have a pattern that explains it really well, I haven't found a ton of patterns out there that explain it real well. But then again, me and patterns, I often look at patterns, and many of them have so many words that by the time I get through all the words, I've forgotten what the first words have said. And so working through this, so I hope we can simplify this just a little bit today of putting a border on it. And I want to share an idea of that I'm going to put together a quilt with the hexagons once this is done, and I've got a couple of projects off my table. So let's get started. I see quite a few of you have come in from East Coast to West Coast, Austria, New Zealand. So there's, hexagons are fun. And let me get the camera and drop you down. So this is what you saw in the little advertisement on the quilt show. And so this is my hexagon, and I decided to go with a 4.5 inch high hexagon and made strips of half hexagons. I simply at 2 1/4, because when you fold it a 4.5, that gives you a 2 1/4. So I cut 2 1/4 inch strips and used my hexagon ruler and simply put it on the halfway mark, and got my 6 half hexagons. And so my 4.5 inch hexagon here. And then we'll get to the equilateral triangles putting this together. This makes for a really fun and nice star quilt. I found a picture, and let me share that with you just so that you can see what I'm talking about when I refer to a star. This is one without bordered. I have some thoughts on this bordered hexagon, which would make great pot holders, which would make great, mug rugs, and putting it together with 2 or 3 and a table runner would just be beautiful. But hopefully you can see that around the hexagon where those triangles are, they create a star. This, because it's so dark and the fabrics are blending together, which makes this a very beautiful quilt. It makes the star a little bit harder to see, but I think you can see it there with where I'm headed with this today. So, all right, let's put this aside for the moment. And so we have our hexagon. And I'm going to take my first half hexagon, and I want to leave a little bit of that point out. So I'm going to go clockwise around my hexagon, and if you choose clockwise with the first one, put them all, continue clockwise around your hexagon. If you can also do it counterclockwise, but whichever way you choose, always do that. And to finish this off, I'm going to need a partial seam, and so I'm going to start sewing in the center of this. Now I want to share with you how I find that I'm sewing with a 1/4 inch seam, and I've got my point off of this. I could fold both the hexagon and this in the center and put it and get it, but I find this is just as easy. I put the edge of my let me see where, get this up into the camera. I think I need to pull my camera up. There we go. I put the edge of my fabric on the center line, and if that little divot or point in there hits on the 1/4 inch line, then I know that I have it correct, and it goes really quickly for me. I don't have to do the folding in the center to get my center on there, which for me, I like that. So I'm making sure that this is correct. I want to start about, that far in, so about right there, and sew my first strip. All right, then I'm going to set my seam, and at least this edge I'm going to press it so that I can move on to the next one. I'm not going to take those off yet. They come in a little bit useful on the other end of that. So now I lay this one on here. I'm going to check my seam very quickly. I don't have it quite on there the way it needs to be, so move that down just a tad. All right, so I've got my 1/4 inch seam, and this first one, it does not hurt to get that pressed well on the end, so that your fabric stays in place. All right, and hopefully you can see that when I come down here that my needle position line and that is coming right out into that divot. Or I don't know why I call it a divot. It's the it's where that little triangle comes in. All right. And again, you can see how easy this is, and I wanted to share this method with you. There are other methods out there to make, a framed hexagon. But for me, this is the easiest way to go about doing that. It makes sense to me. And after a while, your eye pretty much, and I push the wrong button. And I'm going to stop as soon as I get this and double check to see if there are any questions. So if you have a question or you have a thought on this, pop it into the chat box, and I'll check the chat box here real quickly as I got started. Yeah, this grid glider is wonderful. So for those of you who are asking, snowing like crazy in Idaho. Okay. Okay, I don't see any questions right there. So we'll continue on. So I get my next hexagon, lay it down. Making sure that that it's hitting right in that triangle. And as you can see, this is going quite quickly. And here in a moment we'll so always set your seam, and when you're pressing, hit that, the seam line with the side of your iron, and then just hold it in place without the ironing motion. Right. And I do check each time, because I really do want to make sure that I get that right at where that triangle comes in, because if I don't, then I get a little bit of wave. And the reason I'm not putting pins in is that I'm working with bias here, and I want to be very careful as I go, and really the fabric is staying together and the seams are short enough that I'm not too worried about getting off or missing that. So I want to hit the side of my seam with the side of the iron, and then just set it, keeping that all right. Here is where now we have that partial seam. So I'm going to lay my piece right here. I'm going to move this one out of the way. And at this point, once I get my oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't move my camera. As soon as I get this where I need it, I'm going to put a pin on this end, because I find that every now and then, because of this flap that I have here in the, that my fabric will move on me on occasion. So I just, so for once I am going to all right, now at this point, I'm going to press this, and again hit the side of that with my iron, and now I've got this partial seam to work with. You simply lay it over, fit it in there, and sew it from and I'm going to sew up to where that seam, I left that seam before, and sew a few stitches into it, and then I will, and back to that partial As you can see, I sewed into, and I have that thread from the beginning. Let me just cut that off. So I simply laid it over, sewed up, and stitched a few stitches into that seam. And now I want to set my threads. And I have my bordered hexagon. And that, you know, comes in pretty quickly. And now to get that star shape, you're going to, on each one of these blocks, on opposite sides of your hexagon, bordered hexagon, you are going to put an equilateral triangle. And how I, you know, figured out the equilateral triangle is I simply put this down, and because my hexagon was 4.5, I cut my equilateral triangle to you know, the 4.5, and that gave me my triangle with my, you know, seam allowance here, so that I would have that all correct. And that's basically what you need to do. And if you were to continue, you know, going on, that's how you get your, you know, your equilateral triangle as you move through this. So now I've got those triangles, and I'm going to put them on the opposite sides. And as I need to press that, just my point got smooshed. So here I've got that one flat side, and so this makes it really easy because that flat side can go right in on that, and I have my 1/4 inch over there. And you could also go back and trim if you know, need or want to, each of those points, and then you would, you know, you would have that for wherever you sewed. But I find that it's just as easy for me to use that 1/4 inch line on my machine and do that. Okay, now I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And here, you know, I'll do the points on both sides so that you can see it's the same as when I was doing that before. I used my mat on my machine and got my 1/4 inch seam. And I want to press those. Setting my seam. All right. So now I would do that with all of my hexagons. And then the next hexagon would go in, you know, you're going to put them at a, you know, at an angle, and so the next one would come onto, you know, this one, and you would do those, you know, in rows, putting a single hexagon there. And once you get all of these in on your diagonal rows, you're going to have a star point completely around your hexagon. And so the rows begin to be sewn diagonally. And it goes together very quickly, once that you get this part of it completed. And then to fill in, up here, this you would add, you would make your triangles or your half hexagon, and fill that, fill that in. Or you can do the half where you're laying this down and you're going to cut along here so you get that half of a equilateral triangle and fill in those sides, or trim it off. So you can do it however you wish to accomplish that task, and that's how you get your star quilt. And so sewing those into diagonal rows. So again, you've got that one. You put this one down. You're gonna keep doing that all the way down. All right. So getting those 2 star points to come together, sewing that on the diagonal, and then your rows would simply be sewn on putting your rows together. Any questions on that? Hopefully I explained that well. And so, okay. Let me check for questions. The mini irons, it looks like they are in the store. What fabric line are you using for the borders? I don't remember. I think it was from Andover Fabrics, but I don't remember the line. I've had it for a while. Yeah, it is very easy. And the triangle ruler that I was using, a couple people first time on your channel, on the channel. Thank you for coming and popping in and seeing. All right, I don't see any quilts on there, but I do want to talk to you a little bit about something that occurred to me that would be really wonderful. I have a charm pack, and my charm pack is Bright Happy Fabrics. I think it's an Anna Marie Horner fabrics, and I was looking at what I would do around the outside, and it occurred to me that neutrals. So I think what I am going to do is take the Anna Marie Horner charm pack that I have, and I am going to cut my hexagons out of those, because I can get a 5-inch hexagon out of a charm pack pretty much, or I might stick with the 4.5, because sometimes charm packs are just a little bit off. But around here, what I decided was to go with neutrals, and I have tons of neutrals. So I'm going to cut if I do stick with the 4.5, I'll cut 2 1/4 inch strips from my neutrals and make these all neutrals, and keep my triangles probably white. Maybe throw in a color here and there, so I can see that star shape. And if I use completely white here and a variety of grays, tans, and whites around my brightly colored hexagons, I think that will be a wonderful modern type looking quilt. And so whatever, put this as your light. Use solid colors. I think this would be fabulous in solid colors with a solid triangle, white, maybe a yellow, or a very light pastel color or something, and you're going to really see those stars punch out there. And I think this one, because I used darker fabrics in here, the white out here is really going to make that star punch. And so somebody's mentioning cave fabrics. Wouldn't that be fabulous to use a cave? and maybe a shot cotton in here or shot cotton for the star points or whatever. So they're, you know, letting imagination go. And as you can see, if you were simply to make one row of this, put a couple of borders around it, what a beautiful you know, table runner. So, you know, 3 rows would give you a completed star around, and so you would have that star with 3 rows of these, and probably with 4 of those you would get you know, a small table runner, or make it as long as you want by how many of these hexagons you put. So you could make something, you know, simple with it, or do 1 star all the way around on both sides and create a table topper. So if you didn't want to tackle a whole quilt, you could certainly tackle a little bit of that. So then next week for our hexagons, I want to share with you a pillow, a top, or a whole, you could even do a whole quilt with it, and also how to start with your English paper piecing with that. So next week we're going to take a look at a different way to go about using hexagons. And so if you bought the hexagon set, we're going to be using the smaller one and for next week. And that the set that the store has is a wonderful set, because they have all the sizes that you would need for that. So if you haven't tried hexagons and this has kind of inspired you to try that, please go to you know, please go to the store and check that out, because that's a good one. And Linda asked, how do you add the second row? Okay, let me drop back down and try to explain this one more time. So I've got my first block and I put it here. I've got my second block. I'm going to sew that together. I would sew my third block, however many. And then this, when it's completely done, is simply a row. And so you would make a second one, a row of this right here, and this will become a straight line on this side, and you simply start at the top and sew it, you know, just as you would any row in your quilt. And it's going to end up with each of these sides having a triangle on it, which gives you the star. So this is making a row, putting your first block down, okay, and it comes kind of at an angle. It gives you that illusion of that. And then you put your second one down, and this is now the star that goes here. And this row looks like it's going at a diagonal, but when you have it done, straighten it up, and then you simply sew your second row on. Did that help with that? Hopefully it did, because it's a straight seam down once you have your hexagon sewn, and you can go with that. So hopefully, Linda, that answered your question, and we've got that. So for next week, we're going to use the small hexagon, and if you don't have any, you know, hexagon plastic templates, the ones that the store have, it's a perfect set for many sizes and many different projects that you can use for this. And hopefully over the next 2 weeks I can give you a few more ideas and ways to go with your hexagons, and making some fun and some beautiful quilts with that. So I will see you next week, and have a really blessed and happy week with your friends and family.